Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Yanson, and today we are back with a brand new Node.js JavaScript tutorial. And I'm actually really excited for this series because I just love working with databases, and they're pretty cool. I pretty much have went from not using databases to using databases in all of my projects. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to get started with Mongoose. I'm going to explain what Mongoose is. I'm going to explain what schemas are and how you can define your schemas. How to pretty much create models, and also how to actually add those documents or those models to your database. Okay, so if you guys don't know what Mongoose is pretty much a Node.js module that allows you to define schemas. Okay, so what's a schema? Well, basically a schema, all it is just an object, or you can think of it like an object, and it pretty much defines how data will look like in a MongoDB database. So as you guys know, MongoDB is really flexible with its data. So if you have, let's say you have a collection of documents, not every single document needs to be the same exact. Like, it doesn't have to have the same exact fields, right? So document A could have first name, last name, and age, and document B could have first name and no last name and an age, right? So even though MongoDB is a really flexible database with its data, there are times where that could be kind of, I don't know, it could be kind of weird. Not weird, but like, ideally for like larger applications, you want to make sure your data is consistent. So that's why Mongoose is there, to make sure we have our database nice and clean, and it also does provide validation too, just to make sure all of our data is consistent. So let's go ahead and jump right into our text editor. I'm using Atom. Before we do anything else, you want to make sure, one, you have MongoDB installed. It's really easy, you just gotta install it. Depending on what operating system you're using, it could be a little bit tedious, but I have installed it on Mac, Windows, and Linux, so you just gotta look up a video on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, first you want to make sure you install Mongoose. So go ahead and do that. I already have it installed already, but I'll just, press enter for the sake of the video. Okay. So now that we have installed Mongoose, let's go ahead and require it. So actually, here's the thing. You don't want to actually create your model inside your main app.js file. You want to actually create a folder that will contain all the models that you will map to your database. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to call this friend.js, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const mongoose is equal to require mongoose. So I'm pretty much bringing in the mongoose library. Then what we have to do is we're going to define a URL, and I'm going to say MongoDB localhost 27017, which is just my IP or the localhost, and the port, but which by default this is the port MongoDB uses. And then we're going to specify which database we're going to use. So I'm going to call this friends. Okay. So before I go ahead and do anything else, I'm going to go into another tab in my terminal emulator. I'm going to type in Mongo to get this started, and I'm going to show all of my databases. You can see right now I have a couple of databases over here from previous usages. But what this does is it'll actually, if the database doesn't exist, it'll create it for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to say var database is equal to mongoose.data connection. So we're basically storing the connection inside this variable called database, so we can use it for whatever. So for example, if I say, oh, if there's an error, let's go ahead and log that. Error occurred. If there's once it's connected, so once connected, I'm going to say console.log connected to the MongoDB database successfully. Cool. So now let's actually connect to the database. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say mongoose.connect. You're passing your URL, and you're going to want to pass in this one object. You don't have to, but you're going to get this annoying warning, so I just do it anyway. So it's called new use new URL parser, I think, true. And then we're going to take in a callback function, so I'm just going to use a simple arrow function. So we can take in an error and the database, whoops, the database object. So I can go ahead and just say if error, throw error, and then I can just log the DB to the database. So I'm going to show you that we're actually going to connect to the database real quick. So let me seed into models. I'm going to say node friend.js. And yeah, there we go. So we've successfully connected to the database, successfully, and we printed out the database. So I'm just going to go ahead and say db.close just to close that connection, or close that connection to the database. Okay, so again, the reason why I'm doing all of this connection for MongoDB inside the friend model is because typically you don't want your connection to be inside the main app folder. You want your MongoDB connection to be where you need it to be. And most of the time, if we're inserting or we're querying the database inside the friend model, then we'll keep inside the friend model. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a couple things. So the first thing we're going to do is define a schema. So to do that, I'm going to say var friend schema is equal to mongoose.schema, capital S. And inside this constructor is where we're going to define our fields and its types. So a friend typically has, let's say, a name, and its type is going to be a string. Now you can also do something like this. You can also map it to an object, and you can say type string. You can also say required true, and you can pass in a couple of other objects. a couple other attributes or options, up to you. Friends also have an age, so we're going to say type is number. That's the data type, and required true. And let's see, what else does a friend have? A friend also could have an email address. They don't necessarily need to have one. So we're going to make this false for required, because not every person has an email address. And finally, we'll say mutual friends. And for this, we'll say type array, actually. And then required false. So there are actually, I think there are 8 data types for Mongoose. I am not too sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. I apologize, 10. So you can go ahead and be creative with whichever ones you want. But yeah. So for now, we're just going to use string, number, and array. Okay, so now that I've actually created my friend schema, we actually have to compile the schema into a model. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say module.exports, because we're going to use this outside, and I'm going to say equals mongoose.model, and I'm going to say friend, and we're going to pass in that friend schema right here. Okay, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say var friend equals to this whole thing. So that way when we reference this mongoose.model outside of the file, we can just reference the friend variable instead of just referencing this whole thing. So you can kind of see it, I think, in the main. You can kind of see how they say const cat is equal to mongoose.model, and then they instantiate that document or that cat model by saying new cat, and then they pass in the data type or the object with the data type with the data. Okay, so next, I think we're done in here. Let's go ahead to the main app. And first, what we're going to do is we're going to say const friend require. We're going to bring in that friend model that we just created. So that's in models friends.friend.js. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var, let's say new friend, excuse me, is equal to new friend, right? I'm not doing anything different over here. All I'm just doing over here is saying new cat or new friend. We're just basically just instantiating this model over here. And then I'm going to say, well, now we actually have to specify the data, the fields. So we have a name, which is required. So I'm going to say, let's see, Michael. We're going to say age is going to be a number, and we'll just say 20. Email is not required, but we're going to give it one anyway, so we'll just say mike@gmail.com. And mutual friends is an array, so let's go ahead and say John, Richard, and Cody. Cool. Alright, so now we haven't added our document to the database yet. We have to do one more thing. We have to call the save function. Okay, so there's actually two ways you can use the save function. So the save function actually can take in a callback, or you can use a promise. It's up to you, whichever one you want. So what I can do is I can say, let's see, I can say save, and I can take in, I think it's error.res. So if error, throw error, console.log, successfully added to the database. Okay. And then let's go ahead and see what's up. So let's go into our previous directory, and we're going to say node app.js. So successfully added to the database. So you're going to see right now it automatically created the friends database for us because we didn't have it before. So if I go ahead and use that database and I show you the collections, you're going to see that friends collection right over here. Okay, so let's actually search that, or let's see what it looks like. You're going to see we have our data exactly the way we specified it as. Okay, so right now you see the mutual friends array, you see the name, the age, and the email. Now let's actually see what happens if we remove one of the fields that are required. So maybe age, for example. Let's actually see what happens. So let's say John this time. I won't change this to Michael. Let's change this to John. Okay, so let's try to add this. You're gonna get an error, right? We're gonna say it's gonna say unhandled error event, friend validation failed, path age is required. Okay, so yeah, pretty much the reason why we have this error is because we did not specify an age for this inside the schema object. Remember, we specified it as required, so it must be there. Now, if we don't specify it as required, let's actually see what happens. It's going to get added to the database. Let's actually see what the database looks like. So I'm going to say .pretty at the end. So you're going to see John doesn't have an age inside this document. So it's important that you, well, you don't have to, but I would recommend requiring the data that you want it for your, that you want the field to be required for your schema. So you know what, let's actually go ahead and add one more user to the database. So I'm actually going to leave it like that. We'll say Cody, and we'll say Cody@gmail.com, and we'll say age is 19, and this guy, we're going to replace it with that. So instead of doing a callback, we'll use a promise instead. So it's really straightforward. We'll just say friend console.log. We're going to log that friend to the console, and if there's an error, we'll catch it. Really straightforward. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this out. So right now, let me actually see if I can maximize it. So you can see right now we have two objects inside our database. So if I go ahead and run the script, you're going to see, okay, success, we added Cody to the database. Let's go ahead and print it out. So we now have 3 users in our database. We have Michael, we have John, and we have Cody. Perfect. And each one of these documents has an ID. It's a unique ID. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully this was a straightforward video. And if it did help you out, let me know. Your feedback is really important, and it keeps me from, it makes me want to make more videos. So I do plan on making more videos on Mongoose because I do actually enjoy using MongoDB in general. So I might also make some other videos on MongoDB. So we'll see about that. Anyway, so yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.